All right. Welcome, everyone. It's 12:01. We still have a few more people coming in. So as they come in, I will continue to add them from the lobby. Just want to say thank you, everyone, for attending our Title IX webinar. And especially thank you to each of the panelists who have been incredibly gracious with their time and who without there is not a chance we could offer this programming today. If you guys are not aware, I am Haley Carter. I'm chair of the Women Coaches Community. And before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and introduce this esteemed group of panelists we have. So first, we have Dr. Colleen Hacker. She's a professor of kinesiology at Pacific Lutheran and former mental skills coach for the U.S. Women's National Team and the U.S. Ice Hockey Women's Team. And she is only one of two women ever inducted into the United Soccer Coaches Hall of Fame. Our second panelist is Janet Rayfield, an absolute legend in the college game, head coach of the Illinois women's soccer team, and the only woman to have ever received the honor award from United Soccer Coaches. Next, we have Staci Wilson, a former U.S. women's national team player and Olympic gold medalist. And she's one of the few women who coach boys high school soccer, and she currently serves as the head coach at the Pine School in Florida. And last, but certainly not least, Sierra Cardenas. Sierra is the head women's soccer coach at Colorado State-Pueblo, and she's a member of the Women Coaches Community Leadership Team. Specifically, she leads the charge on coordinating coach education scholarships through the United Soccer Coaches Foundation, and scholarships will be opening up soon, later in the summer. So if you'd like to know more and are interested in potentially applying for one, she is your woman. All right. So let's get started. Title IX officially became law on June 23rd, 1972. So tomorrow is the 50-year anniversary. Under this legislation, sex-based discrimination in federally funded education programs became officially illegal. The landmark laws created numerous opportunities and opened countless doors for women in sports, namely collegiate athletes, but it's also had some negative impacts on women in coaching, which we'll get to a little bit later. As the women coaches community, we're invested in the future of both our women athletes and our women coaches. So it's critical that we understand the legacy of Title IX, how it shaped the world we play and coach in, and how we can use it to inspire future athletes and colleagues. It's also critical to us, though, that in addition to celebrating the 50th anniversary and the great lengths that we've come since, we recognize some of the shortcomings and gaps still present, and that we discuss openly and transparently how we can help fill those for future generations. And that's really what we aim to do in part with today's conversation. So just to get started with the panelists, each of you comes from very different backgrounds. You played multiple different sports growing up, and now either as a coach or leading players in a variety of different environments. Tell us, each of you, tell us about your journey as an athlete and as a coach or leader in the game, and how Title IX played a role in your life and in the lives of the athletes around you. And you guys can decide who'd like to go first.
I'm going to nominate Janet.
I was about to say I can tell this maybe age trumps because I'm probably the most impacted. No, I won't say the most impacted, but Title IX was certainly 72. I'm a elementary school student. Some of these women probably weren't in existence yet. So I think back on my high school days as an athlete, and high school soccer wasn't a high school sport when I was growing up, and it wasn't really sports for women were there were people were playing six-a-side basketball. There were still concerns that female athletes couldn't participate at that same intense level, but I remember feeling as time went on that my competitiveness didn't have to be subdued. And I think that's it. It changed the perception as women started participating, opportunities increased, but so did the perception of females as we got opportunities to compete, and people saw that females could be athletes. Who I was sort of changed as well, in the sense of just feeling like it was okay for me to be competitive. And so, I can say that without Title IX, I'm not here doing what I'm doing, being a coach, The opportunity that I had to play at North Carolina was a direct result of Title IX and the impetus that it provided or that it had on collegiate and high school programs to offer opportunities for women. I know that opportunity to play at Carolina doesn't exist without Title IX. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know there were legal, you're not really aware of those things as you go through the process. But I look back and say what an instrumental difference that made in who I am and what I do, and the journey that I've had. Without Title IX, I don't think any of the experiences that I have had through the sport, but more importantly, what it's created in me as a person.
Well, I'll follow that up because I suspect, looking around here, that I'm the elder stateswoman of the panelist. I'll wear that mantle. I'm pre-Title IX. So Title IX was not passed until late into my high school career. There were no athletic scholarships for women. But mine is an unusual story, and I was lucky by birth. And the reason I say that is because I had all and only strong, competent female coaches in my youth. I started out as a competitive swimmer at age 5 and swam for 10 years, and then played field hockey and basketball, and all female coaches. So I just was living, I think, like you are when you're young, in my own bubble. I wanted to compete. I wanted to get better. I sought out sport. Sport was my life. I look at 3rd grade, I was writing haikus about sport and competing. Like, that is not normal behavior, right? And so, sport was fundamental to who I was. I latched on to individual female athletes in my area. Like, whoever was the best in my area, I watched her, I followed her, I looked at her. Now, there's another side to that coin. I will be honest and say, it felt like every message I got was a criticism and a recommendation to dial it down. I have 2 older brothers and maybe too much information, but the message I got was like almost verbatim. Nobody's going to like you. You have muscles. Nobody wants to look at those muscles on a girl every single day at home. And it was confusing to me. I didn't shrink from it. It just was confusing. How come these muscles and the competitiveness give me so much joy, but all these people in my life and family hate it, if that makes sense? That was the era. And I'll finish this because I just tweeted this yesterday. I watched the Billie Jean King Bobby Riggs match live, right? Like, most people have watched it on YouTube. I watched it live. And I will simply end my portion by saying this. I went to school the next day standing taller and feeling prouder. And it was not just a tennis match. It was not just an event. I went to school sort of righteous, like, put that in your pipe and smoke it. Like, it almost radicalized me. It was that transformational. And in conversations with Billie Jean King, she said it wasn't a sporting event. She probably has said this to other folks, but she said it was a social change. And in my life, that was it. It was a line in the sand, and I was never the same. I was never the same because it reconciled these countering arguments. So never underestimate the power of media, the power of individuals, and that transformation can occur at any time in life.
Staci, it's a tough act to follow up, but.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I find it interesting that Janet said that she felt like she was most impacted, because I would actually propose that my career perhaps was, but only because I was able to have people like her as role models. I started playing soccer in about 1984, and that's when they were having the first soccer teams in college. So, you know, by the time I got to be in high school, there was never any doubt of a dream for a college scholarship. Those type of programs were available. I'd gone through 10 years of being able to participate on a relatively high level. They had ODP programs, had some great coaches I was exposed to. I grew up in the Northern Virginia area, so you know, quality coaching. That by that time I had a paid coach. Our parents invested in us equally. It really was, you know, hindsight, really progressive. You know, I never, you know, I did have perhaps, you know, Dr. Hacker had, you know, her muscles, and those were kind of looked at, you know, by her own family, you know, as you know, questionable. You know, by my age, it was admirable. You know, they would tease my parents. We know you got her lifting, you know, so the idea of a girl being um, a tomboy wasn't, you know, frowned upon. So I really was able to dream and benefit from Title IX. You know, later on, perhaps, in going into coaching, you know, Title IX has done a lot for participation, but let's say it hasn't fully created, you know, a discrimination-free sport environment. We're still working towards that. And I'd say, you know, that's more where I'm more, you know, more work has to be done. So, yeah, I would definitely would call myself a beneficiary of it.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess that leaves me. And I think it makes sense because it sounds like I'm the youngster of the group. I was born in 90. And so, you know, I know I was really fortunate, you know, to, you know, come into play after the brilliant pioneers kind of laid that foundation. And for me, it was absolutely life changing because I was born, my mom had me when she was 17. She was a single parent. I was an absolute tomboy, wanted to be involved in any sport that I could because it was kind of where, you know, home life was either, I was an only child as well. So I was either at home by myself or I was, you know, I felt like I really found belonging in sport. And, you know, mom worked multiple jobs at times, and a lot of times I was unsupervised. And so I found this kind of family in my sport teams. You know, other parents took me in moments where maybe my mom was at work for a while, or, and I just really, for me, Title IX has been this opportunity to, I guess, redefine what my story could be, because there were a lot of things. I grew up, you know, in Denver, in the city, and there were a lot of things that I think wanted to pull me down maybe paths that weren't going to be healthy throughout my youth, because I was unsupervised at times and was faced with a lot of choices of, you know, good decisions, bad decisions, and sport was always my reason to make the better decision to stay on track. And I have a lot of moments in my life where I just wonder where I would have ended up without the opportunity that sport gave me, and in the bigger picture that Title IX provided. And, you know, and then it also gave me this great opportunity to, I never really knew what I wanted to do with my life. Nobody really told me that this college coaching thing could be like a real career. And, you know, it's, again, another way that the sport just saved me and gave me a path. And, you know, it's also now been given me this opportunity. I started coaching at the junior college level, and talk about like opportunity. Like I would pull kids off of, you know, the Mexican leagues and the pickup games and, you know, the dreamers and these types of things that without Title IX and the platform that it's given women that have maybe come from a background where they didn't have a lot of privilege, this opportunity to really climb the ladder that we wouldn't have without sport, to get a degree, to find a career, to create a support system of, you know, role models of women and coaches that will empower them to, you know, reach their potential and dream big. And without sport, I can honestly say I don't know where I would be, but I'd know that I wouldn't be near the person that I am, or absolutely wouldn't be on a panel with such brilliant individuals such as you all. So, although I guess I just have the pioneers to thank for every opportunity that has allowed me to stay on track and do something that I'm really proud of and feel a strong purpose for in my life.
Thanks, Sierra. I learned so much more about you in that I didn't know. That's great. So Dr. Hacker, you and I talk about the legends, right, that Sierra is alluding to. You and I have talked about this time and time again as well, about the importance of younger athletes and women coaches specifically knowing the stories of the women who came and fought before them. So, my question that I presented to you is who are some of these women that you think the youngins need to be learning about? And you came back with a brilliant history lesson. So for everyone that's attending, give me just 5 seconds while I share my screen. You guys are all in for a treat. All right. Can you see it? Are we good?
I can't see hands up, but I can see it. So I'm hoping people are saying yes.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, I always share this story. You're going to see her photo a little bit later, but one of the most significant and enduring influences of my life, which is I'm sure true for many of us, was one of my intercollegiate coaches, Sharon Taylor. And a line that she said to us, to me, it felt like every day, is you need to know who paddled the canoe before you got in. Like we were required to know the history because there isn't legislation without people. There aren't laws that are defended without lawyers. There aren't organizations that exist without leaders. And that to me is the meta message. It isn't, go ahead, Haley. It isn't that there's going to be a quiz on who these leaders are. The meta message is it's individuals, and I will believe this forever. It's individuals that drive this nation forward. It's individuals that drive legislation. Yeah, we vote and we join and we have a role to play, but the people you're going to see now had full-time jobs, lives, families, careers, and they invested in a future that many of them were never going to see. And I made it my mission to get a photo up there. Hearing names is sort of dismissive to me. It's like if I said, who's Billie Jean King that you see there, you have an image of her. If I said, who's Megan Rapinoe, you have an image of her. If I said, who's Janet Rayfield, you have an image of her. But we have names of Title IX leaders that I don't think, A, we know their names, B, we don't know their stories, and for sure, we don't know what they look like. Shame on us. So there's a wonderful show that just aired last night called 37 Words. These are the 37 words of Title IX. Go ahead, Haley. So let's start. And notice I list the titles. Let me just share that. Titles matter. Certification matters. Education matters. So when this is a side note, but when people have titles, make it your business to share those titles because competence matters and credentials matter. And so I want you to look at common themes of the Title IX leaders. Again, I'll start with Dr. Rachel Bryant, chair of DGWS. I think Sean Ladd is on the call, a president of NAGWS, but Dr. Bryant was a visionary. She knew the direction that education needed to go to create equality for men and women, and she knew the direction that sport needed to go. And again, part of this history lesson is for many folks, no single organization has had more direct influence on the day-to-day functioning of organized sport from the 1800s than NAGWS. So Dr. Bryant was a past president of AFERD, now called Shape America, first of only 2 women ADs in the United States of America, national governing body of 3 different sports, and on the U.S. Olympic committee. So look at all those leadership positions that you can go. Look at all those leadership positions that she held. The next person I want you to know is Dr. Catherine Lay. Her nickname is Tyke Lay. She was the commissioner of CIAW. She reached out to the NCAA and said, look, we have national championships for male intercollegiate athletes. This is in the 60s and 70s, for Pete's sakes. You have intercollegiate national championships for men. Yoo-hoo! Do you think women might want to play in national championships? We're looking at 2 national champions on your screen right now. We're looking at an Olympic gold medalist on your screen right now. So she reached out to the NCAA. They refused. We're not offering national championships for women. Why don't you start your own organization? Ha, ha, ha. And they did. The women did. Okay. You're not going to give us one? Boom. Look at that, fellas. And they started the AIAW in 1971. And that was founded to govern intercollegiate athletics. And Dr. Lay was also a former president of now AFERD, DGWS, USOC, and the AAU. Are you getting a theme? You with me on this? If you want to know why women are exhausted, it's because in that era, they had to serve every organization, lead every organization, and create all of the benefits that we're enjoying right now. The next person that I want you to know, and I know I'm going quickly, but is Margot Polivy. And these are names, it's interesting to me what names I hear now in 2022. Those names have changed a little bit. I think we're forgetting a little bit of our history. Margot Polivy, remember how NCAA wouldn't offer national championships for women? So women said, great, we'll form, not great, but all right, we'll form AIAW. Margot Polivy was the attorney. Credentials, titles, we need legal experts. You hearing me, Haley? So we love your career. We love your career. She served as representative to Bella Abzug from New York. Whenever I think of Bella Abzug, okay, I shouldn't do this, but I think of when asked if people know Bella Abzug, people would respond, they know her, they're her friends, right? That's my New York accent. Bella Abzug was not to be messed with. So she was a lead attorney with a major mover and shaker in House of Representatives. She then became the attorney for AIAW and worked to incorporate Title IX within the Educations Act that came 2 years later. Are you seeing this thread? None of this exists without the work ahead of time. The next 2 people I want you to see are near and dear to my heart. With any luck, one of them is on this call. I play, now just one human being. I teased Sharon Taylor, my intercollegiate coach. I didn't have the chance to turn out normal with this kind of influence. 2 of my intercollegiate coaches are credited with beginning the first national championship in their respective sports. Just be with that. That's my pedigree. Sharon, don't look for me, but that's actually my first national championship. That was the first, that's our team picture at the first intercollegiate national championship for women in sport. And Sharon Taylor, the list of her accolades is staggering. But she was on that committee that started field hockey. Karen Shelton, Staci, that's the coach at UNC that's won 8 zillion Division I national championship. She was a teammate of mine. Karen went to Westchester, I went to Lock Haven, the good guys. And so we're generational buddies. My intercollegiate basketball coach, Carol Ekman, is credited with beginning the first intercollegiate national championship in basketball for women in the United States. To this day, Tara Vanderveer just got it last year. Carol Ekman, again, my intercollegiate coach, was inducted into the National Basketball Hall of Fame. And to this day, the Carol Ekman Integrity Award is given one a year to the top women's basketball coach. Down at the bottom, you see there, people sort of teased me, and I'm like, I just let it go. It's like, I have fun watching it be fun for them. But people talk to me about not having a competitive playing soccer background. It's like, I'm proud of that, to be honest with you. Lock Haven, where I went, did not offer women's soccer until 1994. I had been coaching soccer by that time for 14 years and had already taken five intercollegiate teams to the national championship game, not having ever had a competitive background. So hopefully there's a meta message in there for some of you as well. Haley, next one. I come from a university of zealots and advocates, and this was the Lock Haven contingent in the March in Washington in support of Title IX in 1979. So we support Title IX as it is because Title IX was constantly under attack. So I come from a university and from strong female coaching leaders that said, you need to know who made this possible. You need to fight for it, and you will be fighting for it for the rest of your life. And they were true. Next one, Haley, please. Wow. So obviously, starting with Margot Polivy, everyone now that you're going to see, I've been privileged to meet in my life. And again, Sharon Taylor made it her point to introduce me, to connect me, to let me know when I had a chance to meet and see these people. So they're not just faces and names and history figures to me. These are human beings. So again, Dr. Bunny Sandler, the godmother of Title IX. She was an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland for 6 years. She applied every year for a tenure-track position. She couldn't understand why she's there and doing well. She has her PhD. She's doing amazing work. Why am I not getting hired? And this was the response from one of her male colleagues. You have opinions too strong for a woman. We don't need that on the faculty. That's the climate in which I grew up. You have opinions too strong for a woman. Next slide, Haley. The next person that I want you to know is Edith Green. And look how recent these deaths are. Bunny Sandler just died 2 years ago. You'll see another death just from this year. Edith Green was Birch Bayh's equivalent in the House of Representatives from the great state of Oregon. She crafted the bill that became Title IX. We hear a lot about Patsy Mink. I'm assuming a lot of people are nodding. Patsy Mink, Patsy Mink. Look, I give her credit. Part of why we give her, I won't go into part of why we give her credit, but she was younger and she stayed on longer. And if you know anything about the recency effect, you know why we remember like who's more recent. This is why history becomes even more important. But Edith Green crafted the bill that became Title IX and that banned sex discrimination in schools that receive federal funding. Then she left office 2 years after the bill was acted. Her son said Title IX is her greatest accomplishment. A little fun fact on Birch Bayh, the godfather of Title IX, his first wife was an advocate and a member of a very strong women's equity organization, national equity organization. So another theme that you'll see here is it's personal for these people as well as policy, as well as future generations. Next slide, Haley. Two more people that are probably more familiar to you. Dr. Christine Grant, it brings tears to my eyes to this day. When I would hear her speak, her command of the English language, her intelligence, her oration skills are unmatched for me. She was a powerful influence for me at really critical times. And we just lost her a few months ago. 1 year after Title IX, Dr. Grant, again titles, became the first female AD in Iowa with an entire budget of $3,000. Welcome to my intercollegiate years. $3,000 entire budget. She's the founding member of AIAW. Are you seeing the theme, folks? She was the president of AIAW. You see these common threads. In '84, the Supreme Court, I just can't wait till this month's rulings, ruled that the universities do not have to comply with Title IX. So if you think Title IX in '72, then that was it. They don't have to comply if they didn't receive federal funds. And 90 lawsuits were dropped immediately after that Supreme Court ruling. Then 4 years later, Congress passed the Civil Rights Restoration Act, which reaffirmed Title IX. Then finally, at least from my perspective, then we'll end with the three prongs. My mentor, Sharon Taylor, called Dr. Grant the heart of Title IX and Dr. Donna Lopiano the head of Title IX. She was the executive officer of the Women's Sports Foundation, former AD at University of Texas for 17 years, current president of the Drake Group, president now of Sports Management Resources. Again, if you want to know why women are tired, because they're running bloody everything. As an athlete, she participated in over 26 national championships in 4 different sports. So this thread of it being personal, and I should be supported and I should have opportunities just like my male brethren. She coached 3 sports, basketball, volleyball, and softball at Brooklyn College. So she paid her dues. And again, I think this is part of lost history. I'll turn it over with this last slide. We hear about the 3 prongs all the time. Most of you are in universities where proportionality is used. I'm thrilled to say that in the course of my lifetime, the percentage of male and females have flipped in the United States. Now, on average, over 60% of undergraduates are female. So just the opposite of when I was coming up through the ranks. So I'll quit there. I appreciate your patience on that, and I'll end as I began. Know who paddled the canoe before you got in.
Thank you, Dr. Hacker. I just want to say, because I see Staci Waterworth is on the call and Sharon is on the call. So for anybody who's ever been influenced by Dr. Hacker in the way that I have also been influenced, I have the book, Sharon. You're also one of my personal heroes. So thanks for joining the call today. All right. So with that history lesson, which is fantastic, you know, one of the things that we've talked about, and Sierra, you and I have mentioned this before, is how do we take this information? How do we educate our athletes so that they understand? You know, Dr. Hacker talks about recency, and there are names that I think are now associated with Title IX that perhaps are much more recent. So how do we take the information like what Dr. Hacker's provided us and ensure that our younger athletes, like your athletes, for instance, in college, are equipped with this information and make sure that they are using it to sort of build who they are as people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's up to, you know, my generation of coaches to really take the reins on the fight, because as Dr. Hacker was pointing out, like a lot of these legends we don't know how much longer they're going to be around, or, you know, they're starting to pass away, and we've got to try to capture their stories. And I think taking advantage of the power of storytelling, and, you know, letting these legends, inviting them into our locker rooms. There's people on every college campus that have fought the fight, right? And so inviting them into the locker rooms to tell their stories firsthand, I think that's the most powerful way, you know, to do it and try to capture those things. And like in preparation for this call, I spoke with our own like local legend who started women's sports. I learned about, you know, she was also founding member of the AIAW, Jessie Banks. And so just to hear her story about starting sport on our campus, she started with volleyball and basketball, and they were sharing the same uniforms that they had to, you know, beg for to even get. And just hearing her story, and personalizing it to our campus, I think would really go a long way. But I think also finding opportunities to celebrate it. Like I saw yesterday that the Dutch Football Association announced equal pay for their women's national team, right? So I think we have to be really conscious about like, hey team, like this is big news, this is why it's important, but then also it's just a reason to keep bringing it up and keep talking about, okay, this is good, it's progress, but we still have work to do. And so I think taking my generation of coaches to kind of take responsibility and understand that the fight's not over. Like Title IX is a law just like any law that could go away at any point, and we have to keep fighting the fight and keep, taking the ownership of it and making sure that these stories aren't lost in history. I think, it's the power of storytelling.
Yeah. Staci, you're in a unique position as a coach of boys. And, what are your thoughts on educating, the boys and men in our lives about the importance of Title IX and empowering women and equity in sport? And, what are the kinds of conversations that you're having with your athletes, not just around, gender equity, but racial equity? And, there's so many gaps, as you mentioned, that Title IX is not a end all be all solution. There's still so many gaps. So, what are the things that you're doing to engage your athletes?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say the first and foremost, is how I carry myself. I'm very aware of the fact that we are kind of young with women being leaders in male sports. And so with that, I do think we're still gaining credibility, still having our, unfortunately, being tested on whether or not we're really good for the job. So I always am aware of that, and I make sure that I take my A game. I'm prepared, I'm planning. I try to be as professional as, the women that were on Dr. Hacker's presentation. I do look at it as I'm representing. Unfortunately, that is the reality for right now. I know growing up at a young age, my parents, it was more race back then, kind of like being aware that you have to be, you're not in a society where things are equal. You have to carry yourself a little bit differently in order to, be treated with the same respect and dignity. So unfortunately, those are times that you have to go through, but I think it's a responsibility that I'm willing to accept. So how you carry yourself, I am also patient because I do know the environment. I do, it's amazes me how, young men will question they're quick to question your, are you sure about this? My opinions, where it's like, but I'm very patient with them and, recognize that they're at an age where, they're still learning. High school is not too old to impact. And so, I don't really give up on them. So I try to carry myself with the right temperament so that they do, I gain respect for everyone. For male coaches, maybe they don't have to gain that same credibility, but I think what's important that male coaches maybe do is show it's really important that they role model respect for women. So being aware of whether or not they have inclusive staffs, and if they do, not just having a woman on the staff, but making sure that they're, again, role modeling, either putting her in situations where she's empowering and empowered, or just how they communicate. If you don't have a female on the staff, it's still, there are still other ways in which you can, maybe have workshops where women are involved, and these are ways. Yeah, I think, Dr. Hacker had said something about it being the work of individuals. And I really think, with the men, it's going to take some don't individuals to help lead the way, because soccer is still, I found it's still pretty chauvinistic. I don't want to run from the truth, but again, I do know, like, even with the success that I've had at the school, I have a male AD, and I think he's excellent. at empowering me, at, and showing that to the boys, showing them that I'm in charge, because there are places in which, they could get confused. So, yeah, how you carry yourself. How I treat the players. A lot of people always want to know if it's different coaching boys versus girls. And although I do think that the personality of the teams, I've noticed trends. I wouldn't say individually that I treat them differently. If I'm going to be tough with a guy, I'm going to be tough with a girl. If I'm going to be sensitive with a girl, I'm going to be sensitive with a guy. So I do think that, with coaching males, not being standoffish and treating them in a stereotyped way, but making sure that, I'm treating them with the same, like I said, sensitivity, perhaps that I would treat female athletes. And I'm tough on both. That's what, most good coaches try to do, is find that balance. And then lastly, just how you, maybe things that you do with your program. I know that I really try to make sure our team shows support of our girls program, and that, they understand the community. Some gender issues maybe aren't gender issues, they're more community and culture issues. And so I try to show that it's not all about us. Sometimes they think because they're a more advanced program, they've won a couple more titles, that either field or equipment or anything like that, they have a right to, or we have a right to. And I'm not really about that. I don't really tolerate any, if I hear anything suggesting that, I'm pretty direct about it. So, and I love to either start practice late or end a little bit early if our girls team is on campus and playing games. And, we support them at their important matches and anytime we can. So I think that does a lot for our entire athletic department and the culture. Yeah, and those are a few of the things that I've done. I'd like to do even more, but I'm still getting to know the team. As we get to know each other, we can do more projects together. So next year, I'm curious to see how it'll go. I'm trying a couple of to be more deliberate in how I insert equality into the program, or the idea of it. So
Yeah. I love that. And I love too that again, you don't run away from the truth, and you discuss like the minority of women coaching men and the need to show up with your A game and establish this credibility that men don't necessarily have to walk in the door right away with. I was doing a little bit of research before we got ready for this call, and according to the Tucker Center, only 40% of collegiate women's teams have women head coaches now. So before Title IX, 90% of women college teams were coached by women. So where Title IX meant the creation of additional women's teams and opportunities, obviously, for coaches, most of those positions have gone to men. And by the way, only 3% of men's collegiate teams are currently coached by women. So you start talking about being in the minority. I mean, it's an infinitesimally small minority of women that are coaching men. So for Janet, with all of that in mind, like, what advice would you have to women coaches looking to get hired in a head coaching position or setting themselves apart? And sort of as a follow-up to this, because I think they go together, and we get this question a lot. I know all of you have been in a room where this question has been asked by athletic departments or administrators or club directors of coaching. We want women applicants. How do we find them? What do we do to attract them? What advice would you also give to those individuals about attracting and hiring these women coaches who are out there who are looking for these positions?
Yeah, great questions all. And it's funny, as I was listening to all of these people speak, I listened with the lens of that question coming, and you've gotten the answer probably from each of these individuals. Dr. Hachter talked about all of these women that came before us and paved the way, and she talked about their education, their preparation, their credentials. You know, that's a piece of the equation. If this is a profession, and this is, you know, one of the things I think I learned when I got into this was I turned a passion into a profession. And it's an amazing ability to do that. But when you do that, you're committing to your development. And so credentials and education and preparedness matters. And so, you know, I think that's the first answer that you got for coaches who want to get into this. Understand that it's a profession, and it is why the transition from you know, Title IX, as I saw the change in women's college coaches going from women to men. I'm going to age myself. I have an AIAW national championship. So I saw all of those women. That championship was for women, ran by women. That was my junior year in college. My senior year in college was the first ever NCAA women's soccer championship for women, run by men. And so when we got on the same stage as men, then men wanted to be involved. And so it is at that point that the coaching transition, because now it was a profession. And so I think we have to understand that, and understand the preparation and investment in yourself as a professional. That's kind of point number one. And then I think point number two is, then you have to believe in yourself as a professional and put yourself out there. So, you know, they one of the stats, you know, if a job has 10 qualifications that you need for the job, you know, the tendency, if a male has one of them, they'll apply and say, I'll figure out the other 9. And if a woman has 9 of the 10, she says, well, I don't meet all the qualifications. And so I think, you know, applying and putting yourself out there, and knowing that you've got people in support. So to put yourself out there, use the people that you have around you. I think that's, you know, kind of advice number 2 is be willing to take risks, but build your safety net first. And you build that safety net with relationships and preparation. So I think it's preparation, relationships, and a little bit of courage to put yourself out there. Haley, if I flip that and I talk about administrators, you know, the people like Staci's boss, my boss at Illinois, those are the easy ones. Those are the ones who look at positions and they don't have a stereotype to fill that position. Staci talks, she can be demanding and be sensitive. And so to understand that, you know, I may not come off as the coach that you've always been coached by. These administrators have had male coaches, that a coach can look different, sound different, and be just as capable and competent in bringing out the best in others. And that's ultimately what you want. Look at how, not necessarily how, but their capability to bring out the best in others. And I think that's, you know, for the administrators, I think it's, they have to undo some of the lenses that society has placed on them about what a coach looks like, what a coach sounds like, what that has been and what that can be, and what we as female coaches bring to the table. I'm not going to lower my voice and yell, and that's not who I am. But I still think that I can bring out the best in people. And so I think administrators have to understand that can look different. And to me, we will get to that place when those differences are actually valued. And I think that's why you see women coaches in some of the professional levels now, because those staffs are starting to realize that complementary, that bringing out the best in others takes a lot of different methods. It takes sensitivity. It takes, you know, getting and being demanding and having that, and it takes people who can understand that and see that. And so we as female coaches have something to bring to the equation, and valuing those contributions, I think, is the step that administrators have to really make for us to continue to evolve.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points. We have about 9 minutes left in the hour. So what I'd like to do at this point is open it up to our guests for question and answer. You've got 4 brilliant women on the call here. So the chat is available. So if you have a question that you would like answered, can you please go ahead and throw it into the chat? I see you guys have been chatting it up, so I know you're not shy. Or otherwise, I'm going to keep asking questions because I've got plenty.
Well, while we're kind of waiting for questions, I kind of want to make a point that occurred to me as Janet was talking just about trying to empower like our players to go into coaching and trying to kind of seek those guys out and in general, or I should say those young ladies out, right? But just I think it's up to us to like reach out hands, because as Staci said, we've got to we kind of start with the disadvantage and we have to do more to get to the starting point that men have to prove ourselves. And so it's harder. And I think that's what leads a lot of women to leave coaching early on and kind of causes the disproportion in men and women coaches. So I think supporting each other and being really intentional about inspiring our athletes, our female athletes, to become coaches and continuing to grow and improve that ratio.
Yeah, that's a good point. The you know, we've struggled with that, right? We talk about just, you know, this is a United Soccer Coaches call, and something that we've struggled with is attracting young women coaches to membership of United Soccer Coaches. And one of the questions that we sort of have pondered as a women's group is, you know, how do we get more of our players transitioning into coaching, and how do we make it a more attractive space? So you know, I think you're spot on, Sierra. Like, it's on us to be reaching out and making sure that we're pulling those women in. And then to Janet and Dr. Hacker's point, I think, you know, being on sort of the younger end of you know, the women's committee, which was now the Women Coaches Advocacy Group, and then now Women Coaches Community, that they have done an excellent job of holding the door open for us. And I don't think that that's true in other spaces. So, you know, I think that we also have to take that on board and realize that the women that have come before us have opened the door and are now holding the door open. And it's our responsibility to bring people in as we come in as well. So I like that. I think you're spot on, Sierra.
Haley, one thing I'll jump in with is, you know, to connect Sierra and Janet's point, Staci's living it, but most of us have benefited from the following. Someone saw in us what we had not yet seen in ourselves. And that is especially true for girls and women. Somebody saw in Janet what she could be. Somebody saw in Sierra what she could be. Somebody saw in Staci what she could be, and then build it and build it and build it. So to all of you out there, if you could be that kind of change agent to see in others what they don't yet see in themselves, and then foster that and mentor that and make time for that. Some of these are just one-on-one conversations sitting on the bleachers after practice. Some of these might be in a team meeting, but the conversations need to start early, right? It's not, the message here isn't every college coach be a zealot for Title IX and give a history lesson. That's not the takeaway. The takeaway is to plant a lot of seeds early. And then if I stay with the metaphor, and then water them and provide sunshine, like highlight, lift, show what's possible, that you matter, that they matter, that these kinds of, you know, I don't know if coaching's for me because I don't, and then listen to why they don't think, and then start thinking of who you know that also fits that niche, that has found a way to do it, right? I think it's one thing that many women in coaching with growing families struggle with. Well, there are women that are role models in that regard. There's dreamers and first generation girls that don't see a place in our society, let alone in sport. when you connect them with individuals and stories, it matters. You know, I go to the 99 reunion for our World Cup team, and I look at the Black players team picture, and I'm just blown away watching what that meant, that these generations got connected, where for some of these players, they heard of them, they knew about them, but they didn't have their arms around each other in a team picture before. The power of that is really something. So never underestimate. I don't know how many people are on this call, but if you can see something in someone that they haven't yet seen in themselves, share that, mentor that, and foster that.
Amen. I mean, if that's not a call to action, folks, I don't know what is. We are coming up on the hour now. We have not received any additional questions, and I am not going to take up any more of your time. I just want to say again, thank you to all of you for being willing to work with me on getting this scheduled, to present this for the membership for free. You know, I personally am very, very thankful. Oh, we got one. Weston McPhee came in. Do any of you have any reading materials or recommended sources, we'll say, that coaches could research to potentially share with their teams, folks, individuals themselves?
It depends on what topic. Like, I love having a reading portion of every team. I really do. I love filling that role when I was with the national team. Like, what should we read? What are we going to read together? I'll just say briefly, I really value and suggest more eclectic reading. Like, think about who your athletes are and then find those texts and reading that's going to resonate with them. It may or may not resonate with you as much, but you're there to serve. As I say to people all the time, and Haley, I hope you won't get mad at me, but I'll count on you for telling me if you do. I say to people all the time, athletes can be athletes without coaches. And I believe that. Athletes can be athletes without coaches, but coaches cannot coach without athletes. You're just going to stand out there in the field with a whistle, right? Like, you need athletes to have the profession that Janet's talking about. So I think of our role as coaches, not just as a profession and leadership, but also service. So I really favor eclectic reading and reading that fits the age and the interests of that particular team at that particular time.
Paulina Gonzalez asked me what book I was holding up earlier. And so everybody knows it's called The Lost Haven of Sharon Taylor, Casualties in the Battle for Equality in Women's Sports. And it's by C. Terry Walters. And the foreword is by Dr. Christine Grant. And Sharon, I got a copy that you actually signed for someone else, but it's made its way to my bookshelf and isn't ever going anywhere. So it is a fantastic book. I recommend it for all women coaches, but especially for women collegiate coaches. The fight that Sharon had and endured in her time to create equality in women's sports is something that I think all of us need to be familiar with. And to be quite frank, it's not a battle that's over. We see it daily still happening with women college coaches as power dynamics have shifted more and more in favor of players. We're seeing it in the pro league, we're seeing it in the collegiate game. The ability for women coaches and all coaches to protect themselves from a career liability standpoint is growing. It's increasing. So, you know, that's a truth that we can't run away from. You know, we're seeing collegiate women coaches let go left and right for various things. And I'll tell you that as a trend, we tend not to be supportive of one another. When we see that happen to a woman coach, we kind of think, ooh, like, do I want to reach out? I don't really know what happened there. I would encourage you to read this book, make it known. And then when you see something happen in your network where something's going on with another woman coach, reach out. and have the conversation, because right, wrong, or otherwise, there's not very many of us. And if we don't support each other, nobody else will. So.
Haley, I think that's a great point. There was a women's basketball coach who spoke out and said, in no uncertain terms, she's like, I'm going to say this. I'm going to hire women if I can, because if we don't hire them, who will? But then I think we also have to find allies with the men in positions that have seats at the table who are supportive and whatnot. I know, my boss is unbelievably open-minded when it comes to a lot of different things. He's probably a little bit younger than most ADs. But one other thing, one of the most empowering things I've done in a long time was I actually had my team during Women's History Month and Black History Month. They all each took a day and brought their hero and shared their hero with the team. And it was unbelievable, because all of a sudden they were sharing stories about people who had impacted them. It was a history, maybe not about Title IX, but it was a history about the people who inspired them or impacted them or had paved the way for someone in their life. And it was unbelievably educational. So to Dr. Hacker's point about it being about them, it wasn't me picking someone to teach them about. It was them picking someone who they had learned from. And it was a wonderful, unbelievable experience. And the pride with which they told the stories about, and I told them it couldn't be a family member, because that, their mom or their dad, it had to be someone outside of that. And they did some research. A lot of them, it was with their career. Some it was people in sports. And it was really empowering. So as far as, finding those things, that's a recommendation I would give to you, is to let them tell you who their heroes are, as opposed to teaching them about yours at times.
And I have to say, Cynthia Cervantes is recommending Achieving Excellence by Dr. Hacker and Dr. Mann, right? Mallory helped with that. It's available on pre-order now on Amazon.
I've got mine ordered already.
Yeah, excellent. I have to say, I like the cover page. I like the cover page. All right. Thank you again, everybody, for attending, and thank you, our panelists. I really appreciate it. Some amazing, insightful thoughts from all of you. So thank you for your time. I'm incredibly grateful, and I look forward to seeing everybody that's on this call as a guest and everybody as a panelist, hopefully, in Philadelphia in January. It's going to be a great time. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Pleasure to be on the panel with all of you. So thank you.
Likewise.
Thanks.